Hello everyone, welcome to Module 2. So in the last module, you spent time looking at some different equity issues in your school, analyzing some data that led you to those equity issues, and then looking at the strengths and weaknesses of that data. So in this module and modules moving forward, we're really going to focus on what are the steps of action research. So our job is to pick one of those equity issues that you identified in Module 1 and start to focus in on it and start to drill down on it and start to think about how could I perform an action research project or plan an action research project which would help me repair that equity issue. So that's what we're going to start here in Module 2. So let's take a second to look at the timeline for this module. First of all, take some time to read Chapter 2 and Chapter 4. Chapter 2 talks to you about how do we pick a research topic and how do we generate research questions. Chapter 2 is really going to help you with the assignment for this module, and the discussion boards. So I'd take some time to read those first, particularly Chapter 2, before you start anything else. Then take some time to post on the discussion boards. There's 2 discussion threads here. One asks you to start to share your research question and your research plan, which is what you're going to also write about in the memo to the principal assignment. So after you've read that Chapter 2, make sure you start to think about some things and post early so you can get some feedback from your colleagues before you complete the assignment. And then the other discussion question in this module is what makes up a good research question and what are some things that you need to consider when developing a research question. And again, Chapter 2 and Chapter 4 will definitely help you answer those 2 things. After you've done that, look over and begin the memo to your principal assignment that's described in the Module 2 page. And it also takes some time to look over the final project. What are we ultimately going for? So what are we building up to? So you'll notice about this class, and we've talked about it a little bit in Module 1, is that we are planning an action research project. So Module 1, you identified an issue. Module 2, we start to think about our research question, and we start to think about what literature and what intervention are we going to put in place. In Module 3, we'll analyze some academic literature related to your topic, and then in Module 4, you'll put that all together and develop a plan for how you would put an action research plan into place. You don't have to get started on your Module 4 assignment, but it might be a good idea for you to take a second to look at where we're going. Start to think about your research plan, post some ideas in the discussion board, and then complete the memo to the principal assignment by the end of June 20th. We'll have an optional check-in, and that will actually be on June 9th, not on March 31st. And that's at 7 o'clock. I'll post a Google Meet link, and you can jump in if you have questions. Again, it's totally optional, but it's just an opportunity. Sometimes it's easier to ask questions over a virtual meet than through email. So let's take a second to talk about what a problem of practice is and what are problem statements when we're developing research. Well, the problem of practice are everyday challenges that we experience as educators. And they can be big issues or they can be issues that are smaller. So they could be huge topics like a lack of diversity in our teaching workforce. Or they could be a smaller issue like lack of achievement on the math benchmark. Both are important issues and both can be looked at through an equity lens. But the problem of practice helps us to define not only the equity issue, but also who's impacted by it, what is the deficit, and how are we going to support it. So our problem of practice is what we see every day, and then our problem statement helps us narrow that down. For our goals, of course, we're going to focus on an equity issue. So we're taking one of the 3 issues that you identified in that first module, and we're drilling down, and we're thinking about, so what is the who, the what, and the how that I really need to look at? Well, who is the group of students that I'm focusing on? Or who are the group of teachers that I'm focusing on if you're focusing on a staffing issue? What is the deficit? And what data do I have to support that? So for an example, I could say that my 9th grade students who have 504s are not transitioning well to high school. And that's evidenced by the lack of course pass rate or their failures and their low GPAs. So my who is my 9th grade 504 students. The deficit is they are not transitioning well to high school. And how do I know they're not transitioning well to high school? Because they're failing their courses and their overall GPA is suffering as a result of that. So that problem of practice and that problem statement, that'll help lead to some research questions and then ultimately lead to an intervention and some literature analysis that will help me even further define what intervention I want to put in place. So I've identified that I need to work with my 9th grade students, particularly my 9th grade students who have 504s. I've also identified that they're not passing classes. So I can start to think of some important research questions. Why are they not passing classes could be the most simple. But then I can also think about the intervention. What is an intervention that I can put into place to help my 9th grade 504 students do better? And let's just say that I want to really focus on a summer boot camp to help students be more prepared for high school. So another research question that I could propose would be, does implementing a summer program or a summer camp for my 9th grade students to teach them study skills and academic skills over the summer before their 9th grade year, will that help them be more successful in the transition to high school? I can further take that issue and start to analyze some academic literature and see what are some important things for the transition to high school and what are some important academic interventions to help students feel that like they have the tools to be successful in high school. So that's what we're really thinking about here, and that's what you're thinking about when you're writing your memo to the principal. So first of all, we identified that equity issue. Step 1 is already done, but pick one of those 3 and look at the data that you have. See if you have enough data, or do you need a little bit more? And then you're going to write a 2 to 3 page memo to your principal. If you're not in a school-based setting, maybe to another supervisor. Your memo should include several pieces. Number 1, the purpose statement. Why are you writing this memo? What are you going to share, and how does it connect to equity? This is where your problem of practice or your problem statement is going to be pretty important. Second, what is the data that you have to support it? And don't just explain the data, but also where did the data come from? That's important to know as well. That way we can know if we need to analyze that data more, or do we need to find more data? Also think about, is it qualitative data or quantitative data, or is it a mix? And then the next thing you have to consider is, what are the next steps for research? This is what you're really telling your principal. You've identified the issue, you've identified the data sources in step 1 and 2, and now you're saying to the principal, this is what I want to do. You're sharing your problem of practice, you're sharing some of your research questions. Start to think about and identify the literature that you might want to research, and we're just identifying topics, and then suggest an intervention. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like in the Blackboard page. So again, your purpose statement is there for the assignment. Your task is there, we just went over that. But take a second to also look at that rubric. Make sure you're identifying your purpose, identifying your data sources, analyzing that data, and then thinking about those next steps for research. Checking off all those different elements of that rubric will really help you to be successful in this assignment. It will also help us continue down the trail, or to continue down the track of our action research plan, because this first assignment will become the first part of your major paper, which we're going to be writing for this course. If you have any questions about the module, again, feel free to jump in to the Google Meet on June 9th. I'll post the link probably in the evening of the 8th or the morning of the 9th, or feel free to reach out through email. I hope you're having a great week.